Greetings and welcome, everybody. Here's another free Friday community class right here on the YouTubes. And this week I have slides because we are staying on topic. I have a lot of stuff that I want to share and a lot of space that I would like to cover as we talk about becoming Herbwise. And if that term is new to you, if it's something that maybe you've heard me talk about or other people talk about, and you're not really sure how deep this term goes, we are going to get into it today. So, a couple of points of our journey today. We will start with a definition of Herbwise, move into the goals of becoming Herbwise. Why would we want to? Look at the path and process. We're going to look at Haya and Willa as concepts for defining the Herbwise path, and a little bit of cheeky off with your head discussion, which we've had several times in other classes, but we're going to go deeper into it here. A look at modern Cunningfolk practices, and then I want to share some references and resources with you, always with the books, right? There's also going to be some fun artwork throughout the slides today, illustrations from various herbals that I love, and I have noted the sources for those herbals and which plants they are referencing on each of the slides. So enjoy that. Let's start with the definition of Herbwise. This is a term that is actually mine. I coined this as a modern translation of the Old English term Wortcunning or Wortcunning, which is a term that you may have heard. I know that Wortcunning is not the sexiest word out there. It's not the most appetizing word, but it is an incredibly powerful word and an incredibly powerful term. And so I don't want that we should, brush it off or leave it behind because it doesn't sound that appealing nowadays. And hopefully, when we break this down, it will inspire you. So, this term Wortcunning or Wortcunning comes from the Old English, and I have a little snapshot, just a small little piece of the Indo-European language tree on your screen right now, showing the Germanic and English branches of the tree. If you look up the Indo-European or Proto-Indo-European language tree, you will see just how incredibly complex all of these child languages are. But I've just zoomed in on the Germanic and the English because this Old English term comes through the West Germanic language stream and has very, very ancient linguistic roots, which is another reason why, I don't want to let it go. So Wortcunning is a binomial. It's made out of two separate words, wort or wort and cunning or cunning. And each of them has a surface definition and then a depth definition. And so we'll talk about each of them in turn. Wort on the surface definition is any plant. It's an herb, a root, bark, seeds, berries, leaves, flowers. It's really any plant and any part of the plant that we know about, right? So that's just the surface term that wort means plant or herb. But on the deeper level of wort, we only ever see this word applied to plants that we are in relationship with, right? We see this applied to plants that we know, that we have named, that we eat, that we have worked with in herbs or in charms, or that have a place in mythology, right? So the worts are plants with whom we have some kind of relationship as human persons. So that's the first part. And then the second part, cunning or cunning, means someone who knows, is skillful, is studied and experienced, kind of a wizardy type of term. And that is the surface level, right? Somebody who is skilled, who knows something, who has a great deal of experience and study in a particular topic. But the deeper level of cunning, is to know something beyond just the mundane, to know something beyond just the thinking, and to have it embodied, to have it living in the blood, to have it living as a skill that is exemplified by that person. So when we add wort and cunning, We get Wortcunning, which means somebody who is skilled in working with the plants, right? Somebody who has that wisdom, that knowledge and experience, somebody who is in modern terminology, we might say somebody who is expert or professional or learned in working with plants. Again, we have to avoid limiting this to the phytochemical or even to the botanical, right? This knowing is a person to person knowing. It's not a cerebral academic knowing, although that is certainly part of it, right? But it's just one part of it. This is a deep knowing, a person to person knowing. And that person who is wort cunning, as we will really be focusing on in this whole class today, is somebody who has that cunning skill because of a great deal of effort and a great deal of hard-won effect from their work. So we can keep that word as is, which I appreciate, using the term wort cunning. I certainly do. But if I were to translate that into a really modern, progressive vernacular, I would say that it translates to herb wise, right? Wort is herb, cunning is wise, Herbwise. And it's a little bit sexier of a term, we'll be honest, right? Herbwise is nice, it rolls off the tongue. And as we move forward, please remember Herbwise and wort cunning, of course, is both an adjective and a noun, right? It describes the state of someone, the beingness of someone, but it also describes an individual person, right? So we can say that somebody is wort cunning. We can also say that someone is identified as a wort cunner or a wort cunning person, right? So we can use it both ways, and this is important as we move forward. So let us move on into our conversation now that we have a good foothold of the definition of becoming herbwise. So goals. Why would somebody want to put in the effort of becoming cunning, of becoming wise, right? There are really an infinite number of reasons from my perspective, but I have, to the best of my ability, pared it down to just 5 things for the sake of this class. I could have easily done the 30 that I had in my notes, but I went through and picked out the 5 that I think make the most sense for where we are going to go over the next few minutes together. So the first goal, and perhaps the one that feels the most esoteric in the modern world, but that should be the most foundational, the most essential, is kinship, right? The number one reason why we should be investing time in the work that it takes to become wise, to become cunning, is kinship, is simply to gain the favor of the plants, to deserve a more intimate reciprocity and relationship with the plant spirits. And we'll talk a little bit more about how this is possible in the next slide. But for me, I will really look at somebody's, intent, the reason why somebody wants to study, the reason why somebody wants to take courses, go to classes, get initiations, and all of that. And I will always say, where does kinship fall on their list of reasons why, right? And it's always, for me, should be the most important thing, that if your goal of doing this kind of work is financial gain or notoriety or whatever, maybe you can have those things, but most people who approach this work wanting that, things get a little weird for them. So we want to avoid that anyway, right? But if it's kinship, you will be well blessed and you will be happy. The next thing is the occult mysteries, right? So don't let the occult word take you anywhere other than what it actually means, which is hidden, right? Or below the surface, or beyond the usual. And many folks do this work and put the effort in because they have an intuitive knowing that there is something hidden about the plants, that there is something more than meets the eye or more than meets the common senses to the plants. And they want access to those occult mysteries, right? They want to understand the spirit, the wisdom, the presence, the cosmic position of our plant allies. And that, for me, is an incredibly worthy goal, an incredibly worthy reason to dedicate oneself to this work. We have community service, which for me is also a top 5, that we will engage with the plants and try to become Herbwise so that we can take everything we learn and plow it back in service of our community, right? Taking all of the blessings that we receive about virtues, medicine, magic, wisdom, and figure out how to turn that around in service of the people we share space with. And that's our human kin and our non-human kin as well. This should be one of our prioritized goals in doing this work. Personal spirituality is another one of my top 5, that we can work with plants for our own personal spiritual development, right? To become more ourselves, to step more firmly into our version of center, to release the things that create chaos and dis-ease and disharmony within the self, so that we can lean further into the beauty and the internal cosmos and the internal states of harmony that we hold within, right? And this is, of course, rooted in all of Proto-Indo-European spirituality, right? The creation of harmony and beauty begins at home. It begins within the light of your own hearth fire. So there is uh, nothing but support coming from me for folks who say, I want to connect with plants, learn about plants, sit with plants for purely selfish reasons, because I think they can help me heal. I think they can help me be happy. I think they can help me release negative or toxic things that I don't want to hold, and they can help me find beauty in the world. And I will say yes to that, right? I will teach you everything I know if that is one of your goals. And the last, but certainly not least, of my top 5 goals is engaging in reciprocity. Reciprocity, sacred reciprocity, is the active religion of animism, right? Is the religious aspect of animism, which we'll talk about in the next slide. Reciprocity means that we acknowledge the gifts and the blessings that have been bestowed on us by the many spirits who help us, including the arcane plant spirits, and that we choose to, with intent, respond to those gifts with gifts in kind, right? So reciprocity is uh, a flowing, infinite, sacred cycle. It is not transactional. It is not, I will give you something so that you will give me something. It is, I am giving you something out of pure love, out of pure respect, out of pure gratitude for things you have already done. I am indebted to your care and kinship. And on the deeper level of reciprocity, we have other classes, by the way, on the YouTube channel about this, about the pagan axiom do ut des, that when we respond to gifts given with gifts given, we create a space in ourselves for more gifts to be given, right? Which gives us resources to give more gifts. This is the practical, ritualized aspect of an animist path. So here are 5 of an infinite number of goals, 5 that I consider to be probably the most important. You certainly could have other goals that are not on this list, but my hope is that you could connect all of the goals that you have to one of these 5 kind of big branches on the tree, right? So let's look at what the path to these goals might look like, right? So again, just 6 things out of a massive list that I came up with, trying to find the ones that I think are the most important to know. I do want to give a little nod to this incredible illustration of Blackberry. This is like one of my favorite old herbal manuscript illustrations. It's so good. So the path begins with an animist perspective. If you do not engage with and experience the world as being filled with persons, then it will be very difficult for you to engage with the plants as persons. We can't learn from them, communicate with them, create harmony with them if they are not wise, sovereign, conscious, and responsive persons, right? If they're just things, then they're tools, and the entirety of the genius comes from us, and it negates there needing to be any kind of path of cunning, right? Or path of wisdom around it. Rather, it just becomes a skill set. So we need to embark on this path with the fundamentals of an animist perspective. Here on my YouTube channel, there is a free 8-lesson course on animism that focuses on plants as teachers of animism. So you can go look that up if this is new to you. I will also try to remember to link it in the details below. So, animist perspective allows us to live in a world filled with persons. Only some of those persons are human, but all of those persons deserve our respect and are capable of communicative reciprocal kinship with us. From there, we move into land-based curiosity, right? It is very easy to pick up herb books and look at all the cool plants and think about all these cool plants and what they do. But not all of those plants are in land-based relationship with us. So we need to begin the journey with land-based curiosity, with looking at the plants that grow where we live. And I mean that quite literally. When you walk out your front door, what are the first couple of plants that you encounter? Who are you walking by every single day? Which are the plants that most frequently exist around you? That is where the curiosity needs to begin. That is the plants, the groups of plants that will be the most accessible and, honestly loud, chatty teachers for us, right? Because they are living in the same place, the same soil, the same sky, the same microclimate, the same patterns that you are. And so you are already in a kind of deeper state of relationship with them. And they are already to some degree attuned to your wild human ways, right? So we start with where we are. And for the sake of land stewardship and water protection and, not having to haul herbs out of the rainforest or on ships across the ocean that have to be sulfured and irradiated, we always want the plants that are closest to our hearts to be the ones that we can harvest, within walking distance of where we live. This is very important for so many reasons. The ecological being one of those important reasons. Then we move into engaging with otherness, right? So we accept the fact that plants are persons. We get curious about the plant persons who share space with us, and then we choose to engage with those persons. And we do that through recognizing that our engagement will be radically other, that we are not looking into the eyes of a companion animal. We're not trying to communicate with a dog or cat. We're not trying to communicate with a human from a different cultural tradition. We are moving into a radical space of otherness. Plants are very, very different from us as people. And we have to be willing to engage with them this way. And we have to be willing to meet them halfway, slow down, play on their terms a little bit, be patient, and open up parts of ourselves that many of us guard. Many of us have thick walls around the parts of our being that are where plants talk to us, where we connect with otherness, right? We'll talk about that in the next slide. So from there, we get into exploring and experimenting. We accept and experience that we live in a world filled with persons. We get curious about the plant persons who live near us. We choose to engage with their radical otherness, and then we move into doing something about it. So now we are harvesting the plants that are safe for us to eat and making tea with them. We are smelling the plants that grow near us and getting to know their fragrances. We are watching which insects and animals take shelter of a particular plant. We are watching the cycles of the plant and learning when they do what they do. We are exploring and experimenting with how we feel when we are in the presence of particular plants. And that is where the real work actually begins. Everything before that is sort of a preparatory course, right? And this is kind of where we get into it, which is good. Then we start connecting to and honoring ancestral lore, right? So from there, we start thinking, here are my experiences with this plant who is a sovereign person that grows where I grow and that is now starting to foster communication with me. What have the people who lived on this land where I live now forever, what have they learned from this plant? What is the relationship there? Or what is the relationship of my particular ancestors to this plant? Or what is the relationship of my spiritual or religious tradition to this particular plant? And we start deepening and giving nuance and edifying our experiences by adding in to the pot the experiences of other trusted sources, right? And our ancestral lore is a trusted source because it is empirical wisdom. It is not the nature of ancestral lore that we will hand on things about a plant or anything else if it doesn't work. Why would we take our great grandmother's cold and flu recipe that our parents gave to us and give it to our kids if it never worked for any of us, right? We wouldn't. We would just stop using it and we would find something else. So the empirical evidence that gets carried through the ancestral lore for me is paramount. Very, very important. The last step here, but not the last step, period, is embodying the green arts, right? So we take all of these experiences and we start having them land in our bones. We start identifying with the work. We start living in a place where the path of becoming Herbwise, where the practice of the green arts becomes intuitive and second nature. And we're no longer thinking about being an animist. We are just living in a world full of people. We're no longer thinking about our plant kins who share space with us. We now know all of them by name and can greet them accordingly. We no longer have to flex in order to engage with otherness. Now there's an effortlessness, there's a friendliness that comes from engaging with these plants. And we have the stories of our ancestral lore and the stories of our own explorations and experiments floating in our blood, which we can recall at any moment. So this is the process of embodiment, right? Letting it into the physical tissues. So with that, we're going to take a little bit of a detour. I wasn't going to add this slide to this conversation, but I think a lot of you will really eat this up. And I think it's very cool. And it is looking at how we can align various parts of the self to make the path towards becoming Herbwise more effortless and more successful. So here we take 3 parts of the self as expounded by Old English paganism, Anglo-Saxon heathenry, right? Some of this stuff may be familiar to you, some of it may not, but the concept of the multifaceted self in early pagan thought is, in stark contrast to a lot of the modern concepts of self, where there is just one soul and that's what you are. In the particular way that I approach this work, there are 9 parts of self. Each of them come together in relationship, in web, to create the wholeness of who we are. So we're going to focus on just 3 of the 9 here because it's relevant, right? So we're going to start with the haya. And the haya is the part of the self that is rational thought. It's cerebral, it's analytical, it's engaged with the real world, right? The physicality, natural laws, all of that. It is a very left brain kind of thing in modern vernacular, but the haya is rational thought. And this is important in this conversation because it is from the haya of that part of the self that our drive for caring and loving something or an idea comes from. So in order to become Herbwise, in order to start earning the benefits of doing this work, we have to care about the work. We have to love the work, and we even have to care about and love the process of the work, right? The hard stuff. We have to love the study and the questions and the confusion and the failures and the successes. We have to love and care about all of it. When that part of ourself is focused, intentionally focused and dialed in, then we have created another thread in the cord of connection between us and the Herbwise ways, okay? But that's not it. We have to add haya to willa, another part of the self. And willa is the place of our self-assertion or our will. This is where our modern English word will comes from, right? It is what we wish for. It is what we choose for ourselves. It is how we choose to engage and invest ourselves in the world. And Willa also implies control of progress, meaning that this is the part of ourselves where we can choose to spend time studying or spend energy gardening or hiking or foraging or spend money buying books or going to classes, right? This is Willa. This is what we will. So we add Haya to Willa, and then we add one more piece with it, which is Leech. Okay. And Leech is the body physical. So here we have thinking, willing, and doing. Physical body through Leech means that we don't just sit around thinking about this stuff. We're not armchair herbalists. We actually do something with it. So we go out and touch grass. We go out and hug trees. We make the medicine. We craft the things. And we engage with the world that we live in through the leech. And this is very important because our ancestral traditions are animistic, sorcerous, pagan, earth-centered, nature-centered, whatever you want to call it. Traditions are not uh, they're not escapist. There are not philosophies here about the natural world being an illusion or a trap or a test. Animism is about a radical and deep acceptance of the world as whole and holy, and that we are part of that body, right? James Lovelock's Gaia theory is very close to what I think a traditional pagan perspective would have been pre-conversion. So we want to involve the physical body in this work because we are physical beings and because this is the world we live in, right? We are made up of earth, so we must engage with earth. So just one little bonus thing I wanted to put here about aligning the Haya, the Willa, and the Leech together in order to forge a path forward into the arts. And of course, really, we should be bringing all 9 parts of the self online for everything we do. This is true magic, right? But we can start here, and I promise we will do so many more classes on this, right? I have a lot of stuff in the works. So let's move into some of the deeper considerations here. And I titled this, off with your head or in love and trust, right? Because that's what is required here. The beautiful illustration that is shown here is from, of course, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This is the Green Knight having been beheaded, and he is holding his head in his hand, which his head continues to speak. And so there's a few considerations, just 6, that we will make here that play into the process of becoming Herbwise, of having that cunning spirit. The first is we have to give the plants that we have now, we know who they are, we know where they live, and we know how we want to connect with them. We have to give permission for ourselves to be adjusted. This is very hard for us, right? We want always to approach this work in a trauma-informed kind of way, whether it's for ourselves or other people, that it can be hard for us to trust. It can be hard for us to give permission to be adjusted, right? And so I tell people, take all the time you need. If it takes you years of work before you trust the plants enough to fully let go and fully move into whatever parts of yourself or parts of your life they need to move in to create the beauty, to create the harmony, you take all that time because you'll still be getting profound amounts of benefit along the way, right? It's not like a zero sum until you get to trust, right? It's not like that. It's cumulative. So we have to be able to give the plant spirits permission to adjust us. And I say all the time that the plants will only go in so far as we have given them permission, as we have given the trust. And so if you go to a natural health store and you pick up a tincture off the shelf and that tincture is to treat, X physical symptom, the energetic agreement there is for the plants to go on to the physical level and treat the physical symptom, period. We want always to give full permission for that medicine to go wherever it needs to go. Internal, external, energetic, emotional, mental, life path, narrative, spiritual, ancestral. It doesn't matter, right? So we get there when we get there. It took me many years. to get to the trust place. Okay, so we just say that. Harmony and reciprocity. We always want to be engaged with the religion of animism, right? The external expression of religion, which is creating harmony and responding in reciprocity. Um, if our motivations for what we do don't have harmony as the end goal, then we have to reevaluate. And if we are only taking or receiving and never giving back, never reciprocating, then we are poisoning our own well, right? We are living in a body of water that is slowly filling up with our own waste, and we will poison ourselves soon. So, harmony and reciprocity must be part of this process. The old ways for you also must be part of this process, in my opinion. So, that means you have to look at what your ancestors or your cultural tradition or whatever your heart's inkling is with respect were doing when people were engaging with plants in the way that we're talking about now. So, whether that's going back to the pre conversion animism or the pre colonial paganism or whatever, for you, you have to go back and at least touch the old ways. It doesn't mean that you have to become uh, English pagan reconstructionist like yours truly, or that you have to worship the old Proto Indo European gods like yours truly. You don't have to do that. You don't have to engage that way, but you have to touch them. You have to know them, and you want to make sure they know you. And sometimes we can do that in a purely academic sense, and it will open something. And sometimes you need to do something a little bit more. But the old ways need to, there needs to at least be a pathway between you and the old ways, right? Whatever that means for you. You've got to find teachers along the path. Don't put yourself in a situation where you have to reinvent the wheel at every step, or that you will sit with blockages or what ifs or plateaus or disconnect and let it consume you or let it get in the way of your work. Have people that you can turn to ask help. Have favorite books that when you're feeling lost, you can just go crack into a book you've read 100 times before and read it again, because you know there's something in there that will stir you. Okay. Teachers along the path, very important. Good teachers. Uh, Remember that becoming Herbwise, working a Wortcunning path is an elfin art or a fey art indeed, that we are never just engaging with plants when we do plant spirit work. When we are working to become Wortcunning, Herbwise, when we are following a plant spirit path, when we are engaging with spiritual herbalism, we are never alone in the room with just the plant spirits. Uh, Depending on which tradition or culture you come from, you will always find other spirits who act as guardians or protectors, stewards, teachers for the plant realm, for the plant kingdom, for the green realm, right? In my particular tradition, it is a very known thing that it is the Ulfa, the elf, right, who channel vital force into the realm of the plants, and that they are very inextricably bound up with the Alpha and with the ancestors, with the inhabitants of the land, and then the deities of those Alpha, right? So this is a layer of profound power that tends to get added, intuitively with people over years of work. And last but not least, on this slide, we're going to end with this concept of off with your head. Here in the picture, the Green Knight has allowed for Gawain to lop his head off, and he's holding his head. And in the myth, of course, the Green Knight takes his head lopped off and tucks it under his left arm as he rides out of Arthur's castle during the Yuletide. And this is a reminder that you will never be able to think your way into cunning. You will never be able to rationalize or use academia or use book knowledge to get your way into, true wisdom states. You can use it for knowledge. You can use it for hard facts, but you cannot become wise with the head, right? It's part of the process, but it's not the whole process. And so in this story, the Green Knight, Sir Bersilac, in disguise as the Green Knight, is telling us, if you want the wisdom of the Green Realm, you must, not literally, please, cut your head off and tuck it under your left arm, put it next to your heart, right? We're combining the um, powers of the Huya and the Willa, the rational mind, the thinking mind, the choice, the choice to engage, the passions and the purpose. We're engaging with the deeper parts of ourselves, with our spiritual power, with our Mayan and other aspects of self. So there is a point where we have to put the book down, and you even have to close the YouTube channel and go out and sit with plants or do the thing that we're inspired about, right? Go have some sovereignty, go have some ownership. It's very, very important. And this is as much reminder for myself as it is for you, right? I am a voracious reader. I have many, many hundreds, actually, technically thousands of books in my library. It's very easy for me to get locked into that, right? But I have to remind myself that study and reading is just one part of the work. So, what does modern Cunningfolk traditions look like? What can it look like? First, and the most important thing, and really we could stop the conversation with this one, but we'll unpack it a little bit more. It's how we do what we do, right? It's not that we do herbalism or that we make herbal medicine or that we sing galder to herbs or that we sew up sachets or craft incense or communicate with plants or have connections with plants that grow in our garden. It's none of those things. It's how we do those things. It's our approach, right? Because on the surface, somebody doing all the points that we spoke about earlier, the animist perspective, the engaging with radical otherness, the reciprocity, and somebody not, somebody, just approaching plants as things, on the surface, they might look identical. You would not be able to tell the difference between the two for $1 million, right? So our intent, the heart of things, our driving factor, which is really what this whole discussion has been leading up to, is what makes someone Wortcunning, right? And what makes somebody Herbwise. What we do is important, but it's how we're doing it. It's what's underneath the doing, right? The motivating factor. So modern Cunningfolk, modern Herbwise, modern Wortcunningfolk are story keepers. This is just a selection of things, by the way. Again, no list I ever do is definite. There's always things that I can add. We're story keepers, right? We learn the lore of our ancestors. We learn the lore directly from the plants that speak to us, and we keep those stories as sacred. We make sure that we remember them and we know them. And when we hear them, they immediately root out in our hearts, right? And we're able to tell them to other people. And these stories help us to personalize the arts and to personalize the plants and to bring magic to these situations, right? And we look at the old charms, the old galder, the poems and songs require a knowledge of story in order to invoke the plant spirit. They require a knowledge of story in order to write an effective charm, right? Effective galder. We are plant talkers, right? We are people who unabashedly want to communicate with plants. We want to tell them things and we want them to tell us things. We try to talk with them, right? Sometimes in the beginning, it's very much that we talk to them and then eventually we talk with them, right? And it's a subtle difference, but it's a big difference. We are hopefully land stewards, right? And if we're unable or unskilled at being good land stewards in big ways, then we try to support the people who are, and we do what we can within the reach of our own hearth fire. Is this picking up litter? Absolutely. Is it making choices about what you dump on the soil, which plants you choose to plant? Yes. Is it how we feed and nourish the animals that live around us, especially if we're in a city? Absolutely. It's little things. Okay. Little things add up. If everybody took care of the space within the reach of their hearth fire's light, then every space would be cared for. So we just start there. Okay. You don't have to save the world. Um, that's something we do collectively. We're medicine crafters. We make medicine. We have the drive to craft medicine. We have the intuitive knowing about medicine crafting, about writing formula, about putting things together, about finding ways for the plants to work their way into our everyday. And we enjoy doing it, right? We like all the stuff that comes with it too. We are students and teachers, always learning and then always sharing what we know, right? Every good herbalist, I say this all the time, people don't always like it, but I say this all the time. Every good herbalist is first and foremost a teacher, right? And secondly, they're everything else that comes along with it. Secondly, they're a clinician. Secondly, they're a formulator. Secondly, they're a medicine crafter, right? But they're first and foremost teachers. This is very, very important. This is a lore-based, story-based tradition. Get into it. Some of us are just herbalists, right? We're just doing herbalism, but we're doing herbalism from a perspective that has a depth to it that makes it different than a purely reductionist, allopathic, Western medical, clinical tradition. And this is coming from somebody who is trained as a clinical herbalist. Uh, there are things happening below the surface in what I do that change how I do it, right? The approach. And ultimately, and I think this may be one of the most important points here, that the modern Cunningfolk act as go-betweens. We work hard to gain dual citizenship, to gain access into the green realm so that we can go back and forth between the worlds, gathering wisdom, guidance from our plant spirit allies, bringing it back into the world of the human in service of self, community, and cosmos, right? This is very important. Always remember with that, there is no way to heal oneself in a vacuum. There's no way for you to do this work for yourself in a way that only benefits you. Every time we make every cell a little bit healthier, the whole of things gets a little bit healthier, right? This is very important. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Here's a couple of references and resources from today's class that I think are specific to what I've talked about today. You might not see everything presented by these people. A lot of this material is my own, but these are good places to start. People always ask me about books, right? So here are just a few that I thought about as I was doing these slides. If you don't have both volumes of Modern Herbal by Maud Grieve, please pick that up. Wise Women and Wortcunners by Rolf Storrell is, of course, a fantastic book. There's stuff in there I don't agree with, but I love the book. Leechcraft by Stephen Paulington, a little more academic, but has fantastic translations of the Lacnunga, the Herbarium 5 manuscript, and Bald's Leech book. The Sin Eater series by Ross Heaven. Again, don't agree with everything in those books, but they're a fantastic read. Physicians of Midthigh, the Breverton translation and presentation is my favorite. And of course, Plant Lore, Legends, and Lyrics by Richard Folkard, irreplaceable for me. I've also written 2 books to date, Spiritual Herbalism and The Green Art. I would love for you to read them. Also, we do have weekly classes here on YouTube. I put a class up every single Friday, just like this one. And then over on my Patreon, you can contribute a little bit of money every month to get access to plant spirit journeys that we do monthly, advanced classes and workshops, on-demand courses, book club, community chat threads, and a bunch of other stuff. And then over on my website, we have the Green Art School, which has tons of a la carte courses you can take, and the complete spiritual herbalism program, which is 40 hours of looking at how to connect with herbs for spiritual herbalism for medicines. With that, thank you for hanging out with me for a longer class this week. I like doing these. These are fun for me. Take care. I'll see you next time.